The New York Giants and their season lived up to something Tiki said on Friday. It's the Murphy's Law season. When it rains, it pours.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Disaster struck again as the New York Giants got absolutely embarrassed by the Las Vegas Raiders, and unfortunately they lost Daniel Jones for the entire season.
Man, Evan, it's a game that you feel like I don't know what to feel. Like, I'm not pissed off. I'm not despondent. I'm almost in some ways happy that we're out of our misery. We don't have to think about, can we get something going as the season goes on. But as it pertains to Daniel Jones, I'm saying this cynically, but I'm going to be real. I'm actually happy for him.
Happy for him?
I'm happy for him because he doesn't have to get his ass kicked anymore. 30 sacks and 160 dropbacks. It's like 20% of the dropbacks this season he's gotten hit on. And those are just the sacks, so he's probably gotten hit a lot more than that. It's why he has a neck injury. It's why now he's dealing with an ACL injury that's going to keep him out till who knows when, depending on the severity. Daniel Jones' family is going to be taken care of. Don't forget, he got basically $80 million guaranteed. He had already made 20. He's going to have $100 million in the bank no matter what happens. He can sit back and decide what his life, what his future is going to be like. He can go be a high school football coach if he doesn't want to play football because of the injuries that he sustained. The Giant fan actually feels sympathy for Daniel Jones 100%, right now.
Yeah.
Instead of having ire and disappointment and question marks around who he is and what he's going to be this year or in the future, there's actually like a sympathetic voice for Daniel Jones because of all the hits he's taken and now the injury that he's got to recover from. And let's be real. We don't, as Giant fans, now have to criticize him and speculate about what the future is for the New York Giants at quarterback. It's not Daniel Jones. It's not Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
And now I know he has another year that has to be figured out. $35 million base salary, his cap hit. I forget the number. It's up there somewhere, though. But he's got a pretty big cap hit.
He will have a cap hit next year of $47 million.
Right. But you're not saying move off from him. I'm not saying that. But he's not the future. In some ways, that's liberating for Daniel Jones.
I totally get what you're saying. Before we look ahead, and there will be a lot of looking ahead from Giant fans and football fans over the next few weeks and months, can we just look back at something that I'm still trying to wrap my head around? So I'm sitting there like we all are. We're watching a Giants-Raiders game, and we notice that off of play action, Daniel Jones trips on Lawrence Cager. Just trips, falls down to the ground. And then they go to commercial break. Mark Sanchez whips out some weird analogy about Max Crosby. More on that later. And we don't think much of it. Just that's commercial break. Let me go grab a beer. Let me go to the bathroom. I know Daniel Jones looked a little beat up. Let's find out what the hell's going on. We come back from this commercial break to begin the second quarter. And listen to what was said on the broadcast. And it was all very, very quick. Because you TV people bring us back like seconds before the quarter's going to start. You don't give us like a few minutes to digest things. I understand why. You got to play commercials. But let's just go back into that time machine to about 4:45 yesterday afternoon.
But Daniel Jones was limping around a little bit during the quarter break. We're going to keep an eye on him on 2nd and 18, and down he goes, and he's grabbing his right knee again. That happened on the previous play, the sack from Max Crosby, and Daniel Jones went down again when he tried to plant on that knee, Mark.
It just buckled when he put too much pressure on that in his drop.
Let's think back now. He trips on Lawrence Cager. He falls down. It looks bad. I think all of us looked at it and said, wow, that was awkward. He's limping. But now they go to commercial break. Or they showed Max Crosby beating somebody. So we don't actually see more of it. When they go to commercial break, we have no update unless you're in that stadium, unless you're in Vegas. But according to those broadcasters, Kevin Kugler and Mark Sanchez, he was limping.
Yeah.
It didn't look good. It was enough for them to open up the second quarter by reminding us before he even dropped back, we need to keep an eye on this. And without any contact, Daniel Jones falls down like he got shot in the leg. Can we address why the hell was he on the field? Like, what was going on? Because Daboll's answer after the game was, well, we asked him how he was feeling. He said he was fine. What? Is that good enough, Tiki? I mean, because why was he out there?
Well, I think the reason is Daniel Jones got tripped on Lawrence Cager. And it was weird because you watched him, and he didn't, like, bounce up. He kind of was down on all fours.
Yes.
Right? Like, oh, something's not right. And usually when that happens, the first thing I think is, oh, did he get hit in his head? Right? Is there a head injury here? Then you realize it's not a head injury. It must be something with his lower body. Then he gets up and he's limping, so you know it's something with his lower body. But there was a play earlier in the game where he ran out of bounds and he fell as he was going out of bounds, and he got up, and the first thing I noticed was this big white stain on his knee. Right? It's just like, oh man, he must have, because to get that kind of stain, you have to come down directly on your knee. And so it's like, oh, that probably hurt. That's gonna maybe be like a bone bruise on his knee.
I want to specify for you, this is the second drive, and it was the first play of the second drive.
Yeah.
He got hurt late in the third drive. So this play you're talking about where Jones ran out of bounds was a good, 10 minutes earlier.
That's right. It was a nine-yard run, 10 minutes early, goes down on his knee. I was like, ooh, they got to keep an eye on that, see what happens. But then when he trips on Cager, he doesn't get up. Right? He doesn't just pop up like Daniel Jones usually does. So you know something immediately is wrong. The reason they let him back out there is because they likely did not perform a Lockman test. That's the test you always see, trainers do when someone hurts their knee. Even if it's not a torn ACL, you'll see them grab underneath the leg and they'll twist it left and right and pull it up and down just to test to see if there's resistance to that pull in the tib fib. The tib fib's the lower part of your leg. If there isn't resistance, then you know something's torn, right? And so they didn't perform the test, and they just asked Daniel. And knowing Daniel Jones, because as much as we hate that he's been hurt, he's tough as hell.
He is, no doubt.
He just gets up and he goes about and does his business. And he probably did not want to be hurt again after spending 3 weeks on the bench, on the shelf with a neck injury. So Coach Dable does what Coach Dable does. He asks his player. His player says, I'm good. Same thing with Graham Gano 2 weeks ago.
Well, I was going to bring that up. I mean, same with Graham Gano, right? Which ended up costing them a game.
I'm good, Coach. So he lets him go. Now, should he protect his player from himself? Sure. But, Daniel Jones he's a big, strong, athletic QB. You kind of just want to trust him and let him get back on his own. Could he be criticized? Of course you could. But sometimes you got to listen to the player, and I think that's what he did. That's the only explanation I can give you.
Normally, I'd say, yeah, you're probably right. But when you define what the hell has happened to the New York Giants in 2023 and the rains it pours year and the Murphy's Law year, they've had a lot of bad things happen, and a lot of those things involve injuries. In fact, if you go back to the first week of the season when Andrew Thomas hurt his hamstring on that opening drive and he hurt it during the field goal attempt, he stayed in the game. Mm-hmm. He stayed in that game, and then we didn't see him until this past Sunday. You mentioned the Graham Gano situation, the Daniel Jones situation. Like, there's so many examples from this past year where part of the things that led to this disaster was the handling of injuries, and I thought that one was bizarre. And I don't hear enough people questioning it. It happened at the end of a quarter. He had a weird trip over Lawrence Cager.
And didn't get up.
Did not get up. We saw that. The broadcast itself is questioning, hey, we're going to keep an eye on Daniel Jones. And as those words are coming out of Kevin Kugler's mouth, Daniel Jones isn't even being contacted when he falls down like he got shot in the leg. So I'm sorry. I think it is fair to wonder what the hell happened during the end of the first quarter into the second quarter that even allowed Daniel Jones to see the field again.
Yeah. No, look, was it already torn? Most likely. It likely was. And again, I don't think they did that test. Maybe I'm wrong. I wasn't watching the game because I was watching. I watched it after because I was in New Orleans. But I didn't see anything happening or hear about anything happening on the sideline with Daniel Jones. So if I'm talking, the procedure is you hurt your knee, you get tested. If it doesn't get tested, the coach has to take your word for it. That's the only reason I'm saying you can absolve Brian Dable, because he asked the guy, you feel all right? Yeah, I feel good. Let's go. And he goes back out there. Very next play, he goes down. So, yeah, is there criticism? Sure. But, Evan, this is football, man. This is not, powder puff. This isn't what you think is going to happen to the league in 15 years or 20 years. This is not flag football. There is a toughness. There is a regardless of injury mentality that football players have to have.
I know Jamal Adams had it when he went after the independent neurologist and said, let me stay in the game, and he ended up getting fined for it. And I respect wanting to stay in the game. I understand. I have no criticism towards Daniel Jones at all. Like, Daniel Jones is a tough guy. And I think that if we never see him play another snap for the New York Giants, which is certainly on the table, I think most Giant fans would at least have a positive feeling towards Daniel Jones when they think back at him 15 or 20 years from now. So I fully understand, especially after missing as much time as he missed, why he would want to be back on the field. But that whole sequence was weird.
Yeah. No, of course it was. And I mean, I get it, though. As a player, you don't want to, especially if you've missed 3 weeks, you don't want to be sat back down again. Now, ultimately, was it going to happen? Yeah. It probably was torn before. Honestly, it might have been torn or partially torn 10 plays ago.
You think so?
I do.
I was going to ask you that. So on that run play, if he actually tore it back then, he ran like 10 more plays, like you said, before he has the awkward trip on Cager, has the quarter break, and then comes back. And on a simple drop back, he wasn't doing anything crazy. The leg just goes.
It's because he plants it. He's putting his weight. He's shifting his weight. His ACL, that's what the ACL does. It prevents the laxity in your knee joint from your tibia to your tib fib. It prevents it from sliding back and forth. So you put one torque too much, it's going to give. And that's exactly what happened. And it sucks for Daniel Jones, and it sucks for this Giants team because this season is essentially over at this point. You just don't have the talent now to win. I mean, Saquon Barkley had a good game. I guess you could feed him 30 times and maybe something good will happen. But it kind of closes the door on any of the, they can figure this thing out talk with the New York Giants.
Yeah, I think as a fan, sometimes you need to be put out of your misery. Sometimes you need it so obvious because even on Friday when I mentioned to you, the Giants are facing a fork in the road. Mm-hmm. They go out and they win this game. All right, they have a season. They go out and win this game. You could even rationalize how in a mediocre NFC, they can go on a playoff run. And then the other side was this season becomes an unmitigated disaster.
Yeah.
And even before Daniel Jones went down, when they let the Las Vegas Raiders on 6 plays on an opening drive march down the field like it's no big deal. Jacoby Myers on a sweep, no problem. Josh Jacobs untouched for a couple of big chunk gains. The Las Vegas Raiders went through that big, tough Giant defense like it was no problem. And even before that, on the opening drive, even I, who've questioned Brian Daboll, said, whoa, 4th and 1 from his own 29, and he's lining up as if he's going for it? That's my head coach. That's my guy. And then what happens? Evan Neal, with his head so far up his ass, commits a false start. And then I find out later from Brian Daboll in his post-game press conference, it was all an illusion. They weren't actually going for it. They were just trying to draw him off sides. But think about it. Before Daniel Jones ever goes down, the Giants have a 3-and-out that's capped off by a brutal penalty. They let the Las Vegas Raiders, who suck, with Aiden O'Connell, march down the field like it's no big deal. They then fail on a 4th and 1 as they try the tush-push. Like, they started this game in such a pathetic way that even before Jones got hurt, now, look, it's only 7-0. Maybe things can change. We saw a change in the Arizona game. Yeah. But even before Daniel Jones got hurt, that effort that we saw to begin this game was beyond pathetic.
Yeah, it was a horrible start. But honestly, I didn't feel like the game was getting away from them. Until Daniel Jones got hurt, that's when I felt like the game was over. But even at 14-0, it didn't feel like the Raiders were so dominant that they were going to do whatever they wanted for the rest of the afternoon. It just felt like, all right, he had some bad luck. There's some cobwebs here with Daniel Jones. He'll figure it out. And then he gets hurt, and then it's over.
Then you're put out of your misery.
Yes, Tommy DeVito comes in, back-to-back interceptions, and all of a sudden, it's no longer a contest.
And look, sometimes as a sports fan, it is better off this way.